little bit. All right. Hi, everybody. We're doing day 2 of module 3, lesson 3. We did 1, 2, and 3 yesterday, and we are picking up with number 4. So I know I forgot to start recording, so I'll go over this first part really quick so I'm not repeating myself too much for class. We're looking at ensuring majority rule. So the original Articles of Confederation, the small minor states, the minority states, were able to block the major states, the majority states, the ones that had larger populations. And that's not really fair. When you're looking at how do you take care of society, you do first and foremost have to consider, what's best for the majority of society, Now, that doesn't mean you would neglect or ignore the minorities of society, but depending on the circumstances stuff, but it means you have to do what's going to be best for your society to thrive and move forward. When they rewrote the Constitution, they did it a little bit better so that the majority states could push through laws, could get things done, but also in a way that the minority states would also have a vote and have a say. All right, so creating a bit more of that balance so it wasn't all or nothing. So we went over these really quick. So why were the framers concerned with ensuring majority rule? So under the Articles of Confederation, AOC, a small minority of states could block the will of the majority states, and almost nothing got done. And we saw that it was ineffective because it was an all or nothing. And again, when you have an all or nothing situation, good luck getting people to agree. It's not going to happen. So you have to be more reasonable, where you make it maybe a majority situation instead of an all situation. Because when you have all, you're never going to make everybody happy. It's just not possible. Okay. Believe me, as a teacher, I've been in a class before, and I'll give an idea, a suggestion, and there's always a couple people that don't want to do this or don't want to do that. And you can't make everybody happy. If you have siblings, right, your parents give you options to do something, where to go eat, right? And there's always going to be somebody in the family that's not happy with the choice. But eventually you have to make a decision. Nothing gets done. What provisions did they include in the new constitutions? When they rewrote the Constitution, under the new Constitution, for example, the U.S. Congress could pass laws with a simple majority of more than 50% or amend the Constitution with 2/3 of the states instead of all the states. So again, trying to make sure that we are protecting the majority, but also in a way acknowledging the minority. Okay, so let's look at how we do that. How do you protect minority rights? How do you make sure that the decisions you're making for the majority aren't hurting or at the expense of the minority? Now, sometimes it is at the expense of the minority. And so the goal of government is to undo that or to reduce that, okay? Or we need to be aware of that and stuff. But the goal, as much as possible, is to do what's best for the majority while not hurting or still protecting minority rights. So while the framers sought to ensure majority rule, they also knew that a strong national government might pose a greater threat to individual rights and liberties. They further recognized that human nature led individuals to seek and enhance their power over time. Today, these individuals think of protection of minority rights. So under the Articles of Confederation, states had dominated on every matter. The Constitution specifically prohibited states from exercising some powers that were exclusively given to the national government. James Madison was among those who believed that representative democracy could help protect minority rights. And he explains this in his Federalist Number 10. Because a representative democracy could embrace a larger area than government that required all citizens to meet together to adopt laws, okay? The U.S. would contain a larger number of factions, so parties or groups, such as a system that would make it less likely that any one faction would be dominant. And we do see this really in a lot of ways come true in our country, in that we constantly see a pendulum shift between two different factions, right? The Democratic and the Republican Party. We constantly see the pendulum going back and forth, back and forth. And in a way, that is what our founding philosophers wanted. They wanted to create a balance so that it wasn't just all one extreme or all the other. Most state constitutions that preceded the U.S. Constitution declared, or the Bill of Rights, although the new Constitution proposed certain internal restrictions, it did not have a separate Bill of Rights. This omission became a prominent point of criticism. So in time, leading the Federalists, most notably Madison, to agree that they would support the Bill of Rights in the Constitution. So one of the things we see in our Constitution to help protect minority rights is the Bill of Rights, the right to freedom of speech, freedom of press, freedom of religion, right to bear arms, no housing, porting of soldiers, right to a fair trial. So much so that it's more acknowledging the individual, right? That the individual would be protected from unfair, persecution or prosecution or limitations by the government or the court systems, okay? That you would have protections as an individual, which is minority as it gets, right? When it's me, myself, and I, that's as alone as it gets, but that I would still have protections from the government, you know, from people who might not like what I'm saying. As long as I'm not breaking laws, I am protected as an individual, a minority, and whatever the situation is within my rights. So that is really, really important. Okay, let's go over this section. Then I got a short video we'll watch. What were some of the mechanisms the framers included in the Constitution to protect minority rights? While the new Constitution gave greater power to the national government, it left many matters in the hands of the states, and they anticipated this. And in particular, I'm going to add to this, the Bill of Rights also helps to ensure minority rights. Okay, there we go. Okay, so we're on number 5, part 1. How have minority rights expanded over the years? So with amendments to the Constitution, we see a lot of changes to the Constitution that are specifically addressing minority rights, okay? And again, when we say minority, that minority group could be defined in different ways depending on the topics. Like the 13th Amendment was ending slavery, right? So in this case, it's referring to a racial minority. 14th Amendment, who is actually a citizen? So redefining a citizen. So broadening the scope and the definition of who is a citizen. 9th Amendment is a great example on giving women the right to vote, okay? So again, addressing a segment of the population that was left out. 26th Amendment, expanding citizenship and suffrage. Civil Rights Act, removing Civil Rights Act and Voting Rights Act, removing restrictions that have been placed for individuals restricting their ability to vote. Brown versus Board of Education, right? Desegregation of society and schools. Separate is not equal. Only equal is equal. So equal access is equal. If you choose not to do it, that's one thing, but you have the ability to do it if you want to. So removing that segregation and stuff was really important. So a lot of amendments to not only the Bill of Rights, but then amendments following that help to ensure and uphold minority rights. And when we see that they aren't being upheld or they're being neglected or they're being persecuted, then we need to make that change. So many examples in our history where we have made the change or we're making the change to address a minority group's rights that are not being upheld or protected. Okay, give me a thumbs up once you have number 5. You have 4 and 5 done. I'm going to show a quick little video clip and we'll keep going. Melina, Saeja, thank you. Let's hear from some more people. Come on, folks. I need participation and at least acknowledge that you're there. Thank you, Timia. Let's go. Thank you, Kendall. Thank you, Amy. Thank you, Angel. Let me know you're with me and that you're there. Come on, folks. I've heard from maybe half. Thank you, Anthony. Thank you, Brooklyn. Let's hear from a couple more. Come on, folks. Let me know you have 4 and 5 done and you're here with me. Okay, to further discuss the difference between majority rule and minority rights, I forgot, I already have the video up, okay? We'll watch this 5-minute video clip. This guy does a really good job of talking about government topics and in particular against balancing. How do you balance the majority rule and minority rights, okay? And the attempts in our government to do this and the attempts over time to correct it when we don't. We aren't perfect. No government's going to get it perfect. And so sometimes adjustments need to be made. And we see many examples of adjustments in our history through amendments and stuff to make sure that majority rule is being met, but that minority rights are being protected and upheld.
You're now going through Unit 3 of the AP Government Curriculum, and in this video, that means it's time to talk about the balance between majority and minority rights. So if you're ready to get them brain cows milked, well, then let's get to it. So in this video, we're going to try to do two things. First, explain how the government has responded to social movements, and second, explain how the Supreme Court has at times allowed the restriction of the civil rights of minority groups and at other times has protected those rights. So just like in the last video, this is a video about civil rights and how the civil liberties outlined in the Bill of Rights have been applied to Americans, or in some cases how they have not been equally applied. So since we already talked about the various civil rights movements in the last video, let's begin by considering how the government has responded to those movements. One of the chief goals of the civil rights movement for Black Americans was to abolish segregation in society. Now, racial segregation had been made the law of the land by a landmark Supreme Court case called Plessy v. Ferguson in 1896. And as a result of that case, the court ruled that racial segregation was perfectly constitutional as long as the various facilities for Black people and white people were equal. And that was what became known as the separate but equal doctrine. So that decision was all that some states needed to pass laws that restricted Black Americans from restaurants and public facilities, and more to the point for this video, schools. So as the devotees of the civil rights movement reminded America, this segregated situation was in no way constitutional. When it came to segregation in schools, the Black schools were certainly separate from the white schools, but they were never equal in funding. Additionally, just by the mere fact of separation, Black students and parents were made to feel like they were second-class citizens. And so the Plessy case is a prime example of the court restricting the civil rights of a minority. Well, in 1954 and 1955, a series of cases under the heading of Brown v. the Board of Education came before the court to address this inequity in the school system. Now, since this is a required case, I've got a whole video devoted to it. So here, let me just say that the Brown decision effectively overturned the separate but equal doctrine and ordered schools to be integrated. The court ruled that racial separation is inherently unequal, no matter the state of the various facilities and the staff, and they did so based on the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause. And this is an example of the court upholding minority rights. So that's the court, but Congress also responded to these various civil rights movements as well. About a decade after the Brown decision, Congress passed two laws that upheld the rights of Black Americans. First was the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which made it illegal to discriminate against anyone on the basis of race. As a result of this, all the segregated facilities not covered by the Brown decision were required to integrate. Second, the next year saw the passage of the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which made it illegal to discriminate against voters. You see, before this law went into effect, several states had enacted poll taxes or literacy tests that had to be paid or passed in order to vote. And this was a thinly veiled.
So just really quick, so like for example, especially in the South, southern states and stuff, there were a lot of instances where, let's say you grew up and you didn't complete much school, or maybe you didn't go to school. I know today we don't, that's, most people go to school, and so we don't really see that much. But 50, 100 years ago, it was not uncommon, especially in poor areas, for kids maybe not to go to school, or to not to go to school very long, so have low literacy rates. So they would put these basically blocks in place that if you didn't pass a literacy test, you couldn't vote. Well, the reality is you don't have to be literate to vote, right? As long as you know the two subjects and you could orally talk to somebody about it, right? And you could come to a conclusion of who you would want to vote for. So a lot of states, what they would do is put that in place, especially in the South, and that would restrict people from voting. So the Voting Rights Act was really, really important in removing any of those. As long as you were a citizen over 18 in good standing, there was no reason that you shouldn't be voting. So again, really good example of removing a roadblock of minority rights.
Strategy to keep Black Americans out of the voting booth. But with the passage of the Voting Rights Act and the 24th Amendment, which officially outlawed poll taxes, Congress upheld the franchise for minorities. Now, I just have to say that although all this is true on paper, it's not as though civil rights have always been upheld since then. Even so, these responses from the federal government were good steps in the right direction. Now, on the front of the women's rights movement, Congress also acted to uphold the rights of women. Front and center here was Title IX of the Education Amendments Act in 1972. Now, the need for this law grew out of a glaring omission in the Civil Rights Act. And Title VI of that law explicitly bans discrimination with respect to federally funded programs like schools. And in the language of Title VI, it says that discrimination on the basis of race, color, or national origin is illegal. But all the women in America sat up and were like, really sounds like you missed something there. No, we got race, color, national origin. That's all the discrimination category. Really? You can't think of one other group that has been the subject of discrimination? Yeah, I got nothing. Anyway, Title IX of the Education Amendments Act plugged up that omission from the Civil Rights Act by guaranteeing that discrimination of federally funded programs could not happen on the basis of sex as well as race. And one of the most visible outcomes of Title IX was the rise of women's sports programs in colleges. Okay, now let's discuss one other way that the government has responded to civil rights movements with respect to voting, and that has to do with the drawing of majority-minority districts. And a majority-minority district is a district in which the majority is a minority. Now remember from Unit 2 that every 10 years when the data comes in from the census, we find out where everyone is living and congressional districts are redrawn in order to make sure that everyone is represented equally, which is to say, to make sure that every person's vote counts equally. And Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act made clear that districts could not be drawn in order to dilute the voting power of racial minorities. And that principle was upheld in the non-required case of Thornburg v. Gingles, which I confess gives me great pleasure to say. Anyway, it turned out that North Carolina had drawn 7 new districts in which it was basically impossible for black votes to be equal with white votes. And so the court struck that down as a violation of Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, thus protecting minority rights. But the court ruled in the other way in one of your required cases called Shaw v. Reno, on which, again, I have a whole video. The short story is that North Carolina drew 2 majority-minority districts, which is to say majority black districts, and submitted the plan to the Justice Department for approval. And based on the Voting Rights Act, the Justice Department said, sounds good to us. But several North Carolina residents challenged these districts, which, to be fair, were drawn in very wonky shapes, saying that these majority-minority districts were drawn only to help black voters. The word for that, in case you forgot, is racial gerrymandering. Anyway, the court agreed and said that while the districts were definitely created with noble intentions, they were so bizarre that the only explanation is that they were racially motivated. And even if those districts were drawn to increase the power of black voters, districts drawn only with race in mind were deemed unconstitutional. So that's an example of the court ruling in favor of majority rights. Okay, thanks for watching. Click right here, grab my review pack.
So ensuring majority rule, but minority rights, there's many, many examples of that. So the Bill of Rights definitely individually addresses that. And then he goes through some amendments that we talked about, and even more of in situations where it's clear that the majority rule is at the expense of minority rights. So needing to amend that and change that, whether it be the law or the Constitution, or state laws, in order to make sure that majority rule is happening, but minority rights are being upheld and can be expressed. So it's not, one is not at the expense of the other. Okay. And stuff. Let's go on, look in our notebook. So expanding protections for minorities. What role does the Bill of Rights play in the protection of rights of minorities against the decisions of the majority? Where did it succeed? Where has it failed? So let's take a look in Canvas. Expanding protection. So even with the Bill of Rights, the Constitution failed to protect rights of minorities and women. And we see that with later passing of the 13th, 14th Amendment, Brown versus Board of Education, the 19th Amendment, that specifically target race and women, and stuff that were not addressed in the Bill of Rights. So the Bill of Rights upholds rights, but the way it was being interpreted was particularly white men. So not acknowledging minority groups, not acknowledging, women. And so needing, again, to make those changes so that minority rights are upheld. Minorities are also protected by their ability to bring suit in courts based on the Bill of Rights or any amendments against actions they believe to be discriminatory or unconstitutional. Guarantee of voting rights are meant to provide minorities further power to protect of their own interests. So its purpose is to safeguard the individual liberties and limit the power of the government, thereby preventing tyranny of the majority, where the majority might infringe upon the rights of minority. Success, freedom of speech, religion, equal protection of the law. Failures, racial discrimination persisted for a long time, and we see the restriction of women voting. So originally, the Constitution did do some things to help protect minority groups or minority situations, but then we see, unfortunately, Jim Crow laws. We see, until the 19th Amendment, we still see the extension of persecution toward minorities. So not in all cases did the government get it right or protect minorities quickly or as efficiently as they should have. Okay, I'll give you a minute to move that over. Okay, I'm going to go to the next page and let's take a look at the primary source. So the primary source is a political cartoon, okay? And it says The Awakening Political Cartoon, okay? It's from 1915. So this is beginning of World War I, all right? And this is that awakening of, things on the Eastern and the difference between the Eastern and Western part of the country and stuff, the West Coast and the East Coast, and the differences in ideology. So let's take a look at the chart. So the title and description of the document, it's The Awakening from 1915, okay, and it's a political cartoon. In particular, it is referencing, and if you take a look at it, let's take a look at it again. Okay, it's got a women and for liberty, all right, and it says votes for women, okay, vote for women. So specifically talking about, the states that need to pass this or need to address this, that women are being neglected as a minority group, from their rights. So it's this this cartoon, the concept is they are addressing women's suffrage. And that's a minority rights issue where the majority were voting at the expense of the minority, women at this point who couldn't vote. Not till 1919. Unique feature. So women walking across the West holding a torch. So trying to spread the word, trying to spread the message, trying to spread the social acceptance and supporting of this issue to get people to vote for it and stuff, which there was a lot of struggle because a lot of this came down to women trying to convince men that women should vote because women didn't have the ability to change it because they couldn't vote. So you had to get men to vote for it. So you had to convince people in the majority to vote for a minority infringement. And that's easier said than done. A lot of people said, your husband can vote for you. Don't worry about it. You're not as educated. These are for people that work. A lot of women, especially middle class, upper class women didn't work at the time. So they thought, you're not in the workforce. Why are you worried about these things? So sometimes the challenge was getting the majority, which in this case was men, to acknowledge the inequality and the minority infringement. No new vocab because it's a cartoon. What is this about? So it's about women demanding the right to vote. So you'll often see before minority rights are actually upheld, when minority rights are being infringed upon, that minority group, so again, whatever the circumstance is, so in this case, we're talking about voting, and so the minority group was women of all different colors and backgrounds because we were not allowed to vote. And stuff. So trying to raise awareness, protest, get people to pay attention, get it on the docket, get people to, gain support. So this went on for decades before we saw enough support for the 19th Amendment to actually change and then uphold minority rights. So what is this about? Women in the Western states already had the right to vote, and women in the Eastern and the Southern states are begging for it. So again, if you look at the image, this idea caught on a bit faster in the West. So this will often happen with social movements, one part of the country, and then it'll kind of slowly spread. So in this case, there was a lot more support, and individual states were allowing women the right to vote individually, but federally it wasn't required. And there was more resistance in the East and the West, okay? So you can see it's like the movement has gained anything that's kind of showing Oregon, Nevada, California, Arizona, Colorado, Kansas, it's legal there, and we're trying to move it from west to east, from the West Coast now to the east and the southern states to gain more support so that it federally will be mandated. There's no quote you have to worry about this time because it is an image. So sometimes images are nice. They get us off a little easier. And then finally, bring it all together. This cartoon came out about the same time that women's suffrage movement began in New York. It is visually referencing women wanting to have the right to vote. and is just one example. Again, there's many examples we could reference, especially racial examples and things like that, civil rights movement, Jim Crow, segregation, ending of slavery, where, again, minority rights being violated. So this is just one example of where the majority, which in this case was all men, could vote who were citizens over 18, but women not being given that right. So again, the push or the movement to get the government to uphold the minority rights or to provide minority rights and protections. So our Constitution definitely acknowledges the majority, that over 50% laws can be passed. 2/3 of states, the Constitution can be amended. So if you have the majority, doesn't mean you have all, but you have the majority, you can get things done in this country. But then we see many examples in our history where the government has had to make changes to the Constitution, and often through social movement, because those majority rules are at the expense of minority groups, depending on the topic, right? So who that minority group is. So in this picture we're looking at in the issue of slavery, 19th Amendment, women were the minority group, right? That were not having their rights protected. And many examples of that. When we did our Supreme Court case project and looked at, Brown versus Board of Education, that's another really, really good example of separate but equal being overturned, that, any sort of separation is not equal. So desegregation, so doing things where majority rule at the expense of minority, in this case, racial, and stuff, to remove that so that all are being held to the same standard. Okay. What do you think? Should we do 8 and 9 or should we skip them? Show me you're here. Respond in the chat. You guys are like killing me today. It's like crickets. Hi. Okay. Do you guys want to do 8 and 9 or do you want to skip it? Let's see. I need, let's see how many people are in here. I have 19 people in here. So I'm going to need 12 people to respond. So either put skip or do. Do you want to do number 8 and 9 or do you want to skip it? All right. You guys heard how many I need to respond. So let's see. I need 12. Okay, so we're going to start with, let me see, where are we starting here? Okay, Alicia, that's 1. Mia, 2. Zasia, 3. Angel, 4. Elena, 5. Darian, 6. Come on, folks. Anthony, 7. Amy, 8. Come on. Where's Julio? Where? Kenya, great. Skip. All right. I heard from Amy. Brooklyn, thank you. Skip. All right, I think I need 2 more. 1, 2, 3, 4. Let me count here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. I need 1 more. Wait, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Ah, I got my 12. All right. All right, cool. I should have said 15. All right. Okay, yes. Let's skip number 8 and 9. All right, number 8 and 9. All right. I don't know why you guys are being so quiet today. Nobody just wants to respond. I got to like pull teeth. You guys have too much candy. All right. So we've got some time. We have about 40 minutes, but I want to spend about 10 minutes going over the review sheet because normally we have the checking for understanding questions and stuff. And for some reason with the network issues, so if you take a look, I'll just show you what I'm talking about. And you're seeing this probably in your Canvas. See, when I scroll down, this should be the checking for understanding questions. That link or part of the program isn't working. I think that, yeah, it's not working. But I made this review sheet before these went out, so I have the review questions. All right. So I have the checking for understanding questions. So I thought we would go over the review sheet a little bit more than we usually do, since we usually review by going over those questions and I don't have access to those. So I thought we'd spend a couple minutes and go over those because remember, those are often the questions off the quiz. Okay. So it's a good way to, say, how am I doing on this topic and when you're prepping for the quiz. Okay. So anything that's in yellow, those are the checking for understanding questions. Okay, so anything that's highlighted in yellow, is this opening up for everybody okay? You can delete them or you could put skip, whichever you want, Elena. Nope. That was why I was getting everybody to respond in the chat. Proof of life or whatever. Okay. All right. Is this opening? Looks like everybody's in there. Okay. The review sheet's opening. All right. Yeah. Okay. So let's take a look at the review sheet. If you are not using these on your quizzes, I'm going to be mean for a second. What the heck? Let's knock you on the head here. Come on now. Okay. Work hard, but work smart. Literally half the answers, a lot of the answers are on here. Okay. So if you are not using the review sheet, you should be. All right. Like that's silly if you're not using it. I'm providing them. You should be using them. Okay. And I literally, I take kind of notes from each section. I even title them. So you can see like separation of power, ensuring majority rule. So like each section, I kind of take some of the highlights or just snippets. That doesn't mean it's everything, but at least that you have like a good reference for each section. Okay. And then I also put those checking for understanding questions. Okay. So I wanted to spend a couple minutes going over those. So we've got the key vocab. If you wanted to help yourself out, you could always add definitions because sometimes the questions on the quiz, right, will be definitions. So you can go and you can look those up, pull those, so the way you would do that is you would do file, make a copy. And then you could save this to your government folder. And that way you can go through and you can edit or you can add to it. Okay. So under separation of power, one of the checking for understanding questions is, why is the separation of power so important if one is trying to limit overall government power? It prevents too much power from being concentrated under one group, which would be faction or person in government. So by separating the power and giving every single branch, the legislative, which passes laws, power of the purse, the executive, that's the president, okay, and then the judicial, that's the Supreme Court, by giving each branch its own separate power, okay, and that no one branch, the president is not all powerful, it helps to keep one group, so that would be party, or one person, so someone elected or who gets elected and they just won't leave, from taking over the government and honestly, tyranny taking us down the wrong road. Okay, we need that balance, and while we love elected officials, we need them to go sometimes. We need fresh eyes. We need the next generation. You know, I would argue that especially right now in the Democratic and Republican Party, we need the younger blood coming up. All right, so some of these older people need to retire. So how do you ensure majority rule? So we see that through the Constitutional Convention of 1787, right, that they tried to change what the Articles of Confederation, in order for anything to change, everyone had to agree. So imagine the issue of slavery, imagine the issue of voting rights, imagine the issue of segregation, imagine the issue of women's right to vote. It never would have happened because you're never going to get everybody to agree. You're just not. You're never going to get everybody to agree. So they had to change it to a majority system, not an all system. And so our new Constitution was a really good thing in that it made it easier to make changes, which helps protect minority rule. It helps protect minority rights. So how do you protect minority? Should that say minority rule or minority right? That should say minority rights. Let me change that. That should say minority rights. I was like, that doesn't sound right. That should say majority rule. So minority rights. Sorry. I'm like, that doesn't sound right. So how do we protect minority rights? So the framers through the Constitution made it possible with the Bill of Rights, and then making it easier to amend the Constitution, like the 13th Amendment, ending slavery, the 14th Amendment, redefining who is a citizen. The 19th Amendment, expanding voting rights and so on, making it easier for those minority rights that are being infringed upon or limited to be corrected. All right. So here is some of the checking for understanding questions. How does Thomas Jefferson justify revolution? The colonists' natural rights have been abused by the English government. Because the English government was a monarchy, so again, no separation of power, it was easy for them to overstep and in particular hurt minority rights. So again, we try to limit that right with separation of power. If the president is all powerful and can do anything they want, I don't care how much you love that party or that person, be careful, because when they're gone, what if it's somebody that you don't like? And not every party makes good decisions for everyone, right? They're thinking only of themselves and what their group wants. And we need a balance of that so that majority of people are being thought about, not just one singular mindset. According to Jefferson, where do natural rights come from? The creator. So when Thomas Jefferson says life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, it says endowed by our creator. So literally saying, we are born with this. This is something that is bestowed upon us. Okay. It's something that we inherit from birth that we should have. And so if we don't have that, we need to fight for that. And so that has often been used in an argument when minority rights are being limited, saying, hey, I have the right. So in my case, since I'm a woman, I could use the example again of voting. Hey, I'm endowed by my creator, life, liberty, freedom. And how am I getting freedom when I can't vote, when I can't have a say in what the government is doing? So you can use that example of, you're saying that this is given to me by birthright, yet you are denying this of me in the laws. Okay. So able to use that to help fight for changes in laws to protect when minority rights are being infringed upon. Let's see here. Okay, in Federalist number 51, Madison argues that the great security against the gradual concentration of several powers in the same department consists of giving to those who administer each department the necessary constitutional means and personal motives to ensure encroachment of the other. He is referring to the constitutions, and that's a long question, but it's systems of checks and balances. Inevitably, people are going to go for more power. Almost every single president tries to do executive orders that they don't have the right to do. So that's why we need the Supreme Court and the legislative branch to limit that. The legislative branch has tried to pass laws that are not constitutional. So we need the Supreme Court to step in and say, no, you are infringing on rights and you don't have the right to do that. So we need those checks and balances because it is human nature to try to take more power than we have. And so we constantly kind of have to be put back in our place, back in our lane, somewhat. Think of it like, I'm sure you've gone through that as a teenager, right? You're constantly maybe battling with your parent or guardian for more privileges or more rights. You're almost an adult. You're going to be graduating from high school. You're on the cusp. So that balance of you want more power and independence, but you also live under the authority still of your parents or your guardian, right? And so it's this constant struggle. And we see that, and that's why we need separation of power, to balance that struggle of power. In the passage, what does Madison seem to identify as the greatest threat to a good government? Human nature, you and I, all right? Humans are the biggest threat to themselves. If you think about it that way, what's the biggest threat to ourselves? Us. Think about it. What's the new technology everybody's buzzing and talking about that's causing a lot of fear in the future? What's the newest technology? Anybody? Somebody in the chat? Starts with an A. Yes, Alicia, good. AI, right? Artificial intelligence. Have you guys seen what some of this stuff can do? It's scary. Like, it's scary, the potential. Like what some of these old sci-fi movies, it's kind of like you hear people going, actually, that could be a reality. Like, it's scary what this is happening. Who invented AI? Tell you this, it wasn't my Roddy. She can barely, she's not stupid, but she's not super smart. Yeah, these actors on strike about, because it can write for them. Well, and see, it's funny because they're the very people who are pushing for those kind of things. Everybody loves technology till it impacts them, right? We were joking about this in another class. Someday, who knows? AI could be your teacher. They could get rid of physical teachers and put AIs in as teachers. My job could be eliminated. I mean, think about this. You know what I mean? Who invented AI? Humans. We are our own worst enemy. Are we trying to replace ourselves? Like, what are we doing here? like, yeah, when you watch old shows like the Jetsons and the idea of having an AI housekeeper or something, that sounds great. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, I'd love somebody to clean up after me and stuff like that. But when you open the door, then it makes everyone subject to it, right? It makes everybody a possibility. Everybody could be a victim at some point. And who caused all this? Us. We caused the biggest threat to ourselves. And so that's what they're trying to say. The biggest threat to human society is human nature. It is. It's crazy. If you think about the problems that we're having, this AI and people and stuff like that, they're the very people, though, that fund and push technology. So you can't have your cake and eat it too, or sometimes you can't. It's careful. We love this idea that we can have our cake and eat it too, but can we? Or have we pushed it so far that, again, it's going to come back and bite us, literally? I don't know. Am I the only one? I mean, we're seeing it. I don't think it's really that far-fetched anymore. I don't care where people are on the political spectrum. Like, you can't deny the threat and the oncoming pursuit. When you have tech industry executives, billionaires going, AI is bad news. This is going to be really bad for us. Look out, right? When the very people in the industry are like, ooh, this isn't going to be good. This could have severe consequences on us. Careful what you wish for, because sometimes it actually isn't to our betterment. So it'll be interesting to see. Okay. Expanding protections. So where have we seen examples of expanding protections toward minority rights and stuff? So we see that with the Bill of Rights. That's specifically there to help protect the individual. We see other changes to the Constitution. So the 13th Amendment, eliminating slavery, the 14th Amendment, guaranteeing due process, equal protection, 15th Amendment, redefining a citizen and voting rights based on race, but they didn't mention gender. So that's why we have the 19th Amendment later, Brown versus Board of Education, ending racial segregation. So lots of examples of where the government didn't get it right the first time. And so we need changes within our government to ensure minority rights through majority rule. And so it's a constant balance. Will we ever strike the perfect balance? No. I'll just pop the bubble right there. No, we will never strike the perfect balance. It will never be perfect. Why? Because we are not perfect. Look at, now we have AI. AI is going to, we're going to become the minority and AI is going to become it just, there's always a threat. There's always something that's throwing off the balance. And human nature, we're always messing it up. So one way or another, we're always messing it up. All right. So your notebook should be done. Go ahead and you can put skip, or you can just delete these and go ahead and turn those in. Turn your notebooks in. They should be done. If you're with me yesterday and today, go ahead and turn those in. So you just go past the primary source page, go past the journal page. Oh, there's another review. That's just a vocab review. So that's why you might want to do like the definition. So go ahead and submit it here. Get those turned in. Okay. And then all you're going to need to do for this weekend, or for Friday, I should say, not this weekend, sorry, for Friday, is you need to do Module 3, Lesson 3 quiz. It's set up for 2 attempts. Okay. You get to use the notes, right? So you just let the proctor know you get to use the notes. You can print them off and use them, or you can have them open as a tab. All right. Those are due by Monday the 6th. One last thing, and then I'll give you some time to work. We're technically in here till 1:40, so I can't let you go this early, but I'll give you some study hall time. Or you could go take the quiz if you want, okay, and get it done. So Module 3, Lesson 1, the notebook quiz, that was due beginning of October, but is open till the 10th. So I extended the deadline because of the network issues. So you've got till the 10th. So 10 days from now, because today's November 1st. Module 3, Lesson 2, notebook and quiz. Those close on the 17th. So that was due right before the network issues. It was due on the 16th, I believe. So now you have 2.5 weeks or so if you need to get that in. And then Supreme Court case project, that was due this past Monday. We started it before, though. We started it before all the network issues. So get that in. I can't emphasize that enough. Out of everything on here, get that Supreme Court case project in, because that is worth a ton of points in the summative category. So it'll have a big impact on your grade. So I'm recording this session, so that's why there's no video yet for today. You guys are my first. So on Wednesdays, you guys are my only government class. So you guys are my, second day, but first time. And then I have all the other government classes on Thursday. So first day is there. If you scroll back up through the chat, they are there. Were you in class the whole time? So if you scroll back up through the chat, they are there. I put all of them in the chat. Okay, so then you'll have to go back then. Okay, it's just because if every person that comes in late, I have to redo it and stuff like that. That's not fair. Okay, so I will post this though by the end of the day, and then you can go back and just watch the first 10 minutes. Okay. All right. So for the next 20 minutes, yeah. So I'll have it this recording on the block day is a little long, so sometimes it takes a little bit for the video, but I'll have it up hopefully by 3 o'clock today. All right. So we're going to take about 20 more minutes. I'll let you go a few minutes early today, but we're going to take about 20 minutes, finish up this notebook, get it in. Okay. Make sure you have your review sheet, and then work on something for this class. Make sure that your late work is in. I have a lot of people not passing. So get a notebook in, get the Supreme Court case project in, get something in, work on something for this class. that you are behind on. And again, all of these things are from before the network issues. I didn't assign anything new, and take that opportunity to get some work in. If you need to see me on Friday, I'm available for small group from 9 to 11, or on Monday, I'm available for small group from 9 to 11. So if you have any questions about your grades or any issues or anything like that, then you can come see me. All right, so we'll do study hall for like the next 20 minutes. All right, and then I'll let you go.